Welcome back to the Corner of Story and Game, the podcast where we explore storytelling at the heart of game design. I'm your host, Gerald Ford, and today we're diving into a role that's evolved as fast as the medium itself, the narrative designer. Joining me is Ashley Poprik, a narrative designer and game writer whose work includes Call of Duty, Black Ops 6, Marvel's Spider-Man 2, and much more. Ashley has written for some of the most iconic franchises in gaming, and beyond that, she's a mentor, speaker, and fierce advocate for inclusive storytelling and creative sustainability in this ever-shifting industry. So let's get into it. Ashley, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
I am extremely excited to get a little bit of your time. I know how busy you are right now, but I really wanted to talk to you about the evolving role that is narrative designer. I've talked to a lot of different people about what it means to them and what it's becoming and how it's changing, but you seem like the perfect person to pick your brain on this. So thank you again for sitting down and doing this.
Absolutely. I'm excited to get into this topic.
Before we get into the topic too much, though, I do like to set the stage with your origin story. How did you fall in love with writing and gaming, and what was your career journey to get to where you are today?
So I went in a strangely almost like traditional sense. So I had gone to an undergrad, of course, in film. Video game degrees aren't that common yet, but I was super interested in game development, and I learned about game development club that was through our college. So I was doing game jams and stuff while still, working in classes. And I had some extracurricular kind of film and TV stuff as well. And I think the mix of those two got Insomniac interested when they had an opening for a writing intern. And so I had my first actual big studio job as an intern at Insomniac Games, where I worked on Marvel's Spider-Man 2. And from there, I have been working just in a bunch of different video game studios ever since. I've hopped around a little bit, but I've just been consistently game writing. So a lot of people don't have the same I had an internship and then I just kind of applied and kept going. But that is how it worked for me.
Wow. Yeah, you hear a lot of different stories about how people wander into the industry in different ways. It's really interesting. Before post-secondary, little Ashley, did you play games as a kid? What was your what pulled you into that world?
Oh, I was crazy into video games. I was honestly, especially as a kid, I was super obsessed with games. Oh my gosh, the one that had honestly just the franchise that had a huge hold on me were the Rayman games. I was just if a game that was in Rayman or the Rabbids I guess IP came out, it was on my shelf and I would have played through all of it. And oh my gosh, I was in third grade and a Rayman game had come out, and it was really my first game that I had actually gotten into and gotten to play. And I was just so obsessed with it. I remember writing essentially fan fiction of me working at Ubisoft and meeting the characters in real life and actually making them. And this was when I was 7 or 8. I wasn't particularly popular, but it just kind of started from there, and I was super into video games growing up. It's funny because now I'm spending so much time making them that I don't get to have as much time playing them. But that was my number one time sink. I got super into not only just game worlds, but just kind of I don't know, really basic video games and video game stories. I was obsessed with just simple stories with straightforward characters. It's funny because now I'm not really working in that space. I feel honestly, just in terms of the games industry, a lot of those games that I was playing so much are not really a thing that's being made anymore. Like, gosh, I don't remember the last time Ubisoft has made like a Rayman game, you know. And I was also super into like oh my gosh, this is like so cringe, but I was super into like dance games and like fitness games. They don't make those anymore. No one cares. But they would make like all these like super interesting like characters and stuff. And I was super interested in that too. Um it's not something that I feel like we see much more nowadays. But that was kind of what grabbed my heart at the start.
Very cool. There's got to be a DDR machine somewhere at an arcade you could go and jump on and
Oh yeah.
go.
Oh yeah. There's a round one that's pretty close. I'm always tempted. It calls to me like the Green Goblin mask.
Like Green Goblin esque. Did you play tabletop as a kid at all? I'm always curious. Did you play any D&D or board games or?
No, I actually didn't. I feel like when I was a kid, I was super I would get super bored by just board games. Because we were I mean, my family was very like Monopoly and Clue focused. We were like a very like Hasbro household, and that was basically all that I knew existed. And so I was like, man, the instructions are like so sluggish to get through, and I don't once you play Clue once, like you're like, yep, that's the game. You know, there's not really like a role playing element to it. And so I just kind of was like, oh, that's what all board games have to offer. And it wasn't until I started getting older and like in high school and college started playing tabletop games, and that's when I got like super into them. And I even funny enough, I worked on some board games at Hasbro because I was like, okay, if I found like those games to be super boring, what are ways that I can change that so that they're super interesting? And in that, I just like in studying different inspiration games and card games and board games, all of that, got even more into it. So I'm definitely more of a fan now. But growing up, I was not, which is so bizarre.
Interesting. Okay, let's dig into the core topic here. That's cool, and it's interesting to hear narrative designers and game writers and whether or not they played tabletop role playing games because there really is a strong connection there. But
Mhm.
that's not what we're here to talk about today. We're talking about the evolving role of narrative designers. I'm curious, over the past decade, the period you've been working in games, how have you seen this role evolve, become defined, shift?
In the past decade, I mean, and it feels like it's such a new thing even still, but I've started to see a shift in the games industry when um directors or just kind of like higher level executives are thinking about what their story needs. There is more of a consideration for narrative in general. Even though there was narrative in games, you know, since forever, it just didn't seem to take like the forefront of a lot of studios' minds. That it was something that you should have like a team of people that are delegated to and dedicated to making those stories. Usually it was just kind of like, oh, it's this guy who's on the team who's doing something else, but is also interested in writing, and then they kind of get into a writer role through that. But it hasn't necessarily been like its own thing for a while. And even now, we're just starting to see that change in perspective. Um, Quite a few jobs that I have gotten, especially in the indie space. Um, I have been their first and only game writer. They had been a studio that had been running for, 5, 10 years, and they had never had a writer until I was there. And it was just because that was not something that they had taken into consideration as something that they needed. And it's not like, I mean, it's again, it's not like these stories didn't exist, but I think it was kind of at the time where people just didn't realize that audiences are wanting to pay attention to that sort of stuff, and it's not enough just to like slap something together. And with that, yeah, with that focus in making a stronger narrative for your games, we're seeing just more of those games coming in and solidifying too.
Hmm, interesting. Um, you mentioned the collaborative nature of the role of the industry as a whole, I suppose. As narrative designers become more integrated and have to interface more with all these other disciplines, what are some of the new underappreciated even aspects or parts of the job that you're seeing?
I feel like something that a lot of people don't consider is that narrative designers and also game writers aren't always we're not just in charge of, making the words. So something that I think people don't necessarily realize is that a lot of narrative designers are actually getting into the engine and they're having to work with timing. We're also working with all of the other disciplines to find like not just, hey, where can we put dialogue, but also what are some interesting things that we can do with the environment or with UI, with sound that helps bring that narrative into the forefront? Because if we're just trying to put words in, and I'm sure you've heard this before, but players don't necessarily want to listen to what it is that we're writing, and they especially don't want to read it. So finding other ways to inject it into the world without it being considered, a chore for the player is always super beneficial. And I think another thing that people just don't really think about, that is honestly one of my favorite parts of the job is we are always in when there's like games that have voice actors, we're also in the VO sessions. And so it's our job to make sure that the voice actor is understanding the context of the lines that we're writing. And that is honestly more difficult than it sounds because um when you're considering like a movie script or a TV script, like for the most part, there's just like one linear way of doing things. You're just seeing something happening from beginning to end, and so it's very easy to follow that like through line. But in games, there's so many conditions, and there are conversations that are happening sometimes out of order and sometimes in ways where like the player might not even notice it. Um, and so it's not enough just to give a voice actor like a script with their lines and be like, "Yep, here you go." Because there just needs to be a lot more context added, as opposed to it being in a different medium. And so we're there to kind of help them through that process and also work when we're making those scripts, whether that be in like Final Draft or Excel, Yarn Spinner, any of the other billions of game writing tools, to make sure that it has that proper context beforehand, so that we're getting the performance we need, whether that be like, okay, they're crawling through event at this part, so everything needs to be in a whisper, or like, oh, they're in a much more high combat situation than they were like 10 seconds before, so you need to be, yelling over the sound of metaphorical gunfire right now. All of that fun stuff. And it's honestly one of my favorite things to do because it's so rare when doing just like narrative design and game writing, helping out those like voice direction sessions because it's just really cool to see a voice actor bring that stuff to life. But it's not something that you're always seeing in like a narrative design like job posting.
I'm probably just a theater nerd, but that sounds like a lot of fun to me.
It's a blast. It is a blast.
Very cool. Oh, you're talking about things like environmental design, level design, mission design. Like these are all things that as a narrative designer, you're probably getting your fingers into then if you're, or at least trying to help out. When you're dealing with all that stuff, is there a consideration for production and, scope and cost and time versus narrative intent and emotional resonance and a storyline that pays off? Where do you find the balance? I know that's a really big question, but I'm just looking for Ashley's. I want your point of view on this.
Yeah, the so honestly, the way that I approach balancing the narrative intent with just like structural and production needs is and some people don't like the answer to this, but I kind of go with what the other teams are focusing on. And so I feel like as a game writer, especially, our stuff can be the most fluid. And there's things that are changing in the other disciplines like all day every day that are much more constrained and kind of locked in. Um, Even though they seem to just kind of like come up on a whim. It's not an easy or good feat to try to like change that stuff, I guess. So when I in general am working on writing and things are constantly like evolving, um, especially when it comes to, yeah, like the level flow is changing or even some missions are being cut, stuff like that. I really work to see with what the designers are thinking and where their kind of like expertise lies in terms of like, okay, well, how should things be like structured out now? And then I kind of use that as like a sandbox and guidelines to work from there. Because if I try to mold any other discipline to fit like the narrative intent, it's just going to make a worse game. So if I can change and shift the intent with kind of what everybody else is doing, it makes it a lot smoother, much smoother process. And I think in general, like um, there's so many great stories to tell, and so if things change, then I just need to find out how can I tell a good story within this space as opposed to how do I try to jam this other story that I want into this space.
Being the empathetic glue that holds the whole machine together sometimes, do you ever feel like you're giving up on a story that means something to you, or even a moment or a character or a setting that means something, but you have to let it go in order to make the whole thing work?
Oh yeah, for sure. I still get really, I still get attached to things that I work on. And I do feel like it gets easier. But there are definitely some things that um you'll I'll be playing a shipped game that I worked on and I'll be like, "Oh man, I remember when like this was supposed to be this. Ah, that would have been so cool." Um it feels like deleted scenes that like only I can know. But knowing that like if we were able to make it work, that players would have loved it. I always just gotta sit with that, my deep dark secrets.
That sounds hard. That does. I'll be honest.
It gets easier. I feel like I get used to it, you know. It gets easier to kill your darlings when you're told that you're gonna have to kill them.
Part of being a big collaborative team, I guess, eh?
Hmm.
All right. Well, narrative designer, narrative design role, looking ahead, what kind of skills, tools, mindsets even do you think people are going to need that you're going to work on yourself in order to evolve and thrive over the next 5 or 10 years?
I am personally trying to evolve with the narrative design role by focusing more on design, actually. I came in, as I said, with the background working kind of more in like short films, and I went to film school. Um, I I would not say that I have like all of the answers to writing, but I have much less of the answers in terms of understanding holistic game design. And that's something that's very important to me when it comes to just being a good collaborator. I think that that is probably the one thing that I still see in studios that are bringing in writers. There's a bit of strain between narrative designers and level designers because the narrative designer is trying to make, the best story possible in that space, and a level designer is really just trying to make it fun. So there's almost like a disconnect in the two goals there sometimes. And sometimes narrative designers don't realize that if if the story is bad but the gameplay is good, you still have a good game. But if the game is bad while the story is good, like you just have a bad game with a decent story. And we're game writers first. Game is what comes before writer. And so I think that it would be just in our games and our project's best interest if I, as well as other narrative designers, have a more design background so that we know uh, just more about the parameters of the sandbox that we're working in, and what are ways that we can enhance that to make this game the best that it could possibly be. Because in the same way that like narrative designers don't have all the design answers. Designers don't always have the writing answers, and it could be difficult to find a solution when neither of you really knows what the other discipline does. And that was something that I had run into a few times where, we'll get in a playtest session and a player doesn't understand what's going on in the game, and the thought sometimes from design is, well, like, just write a line that describes exactly what it is that we're doing. And it's like, yes, but if the player's not listening in the first place, then it doesn't really matter. And so you need to find a way to pitch something that is more design focused. But then if I don't know what that would be, then, we're just kind of sitting on our hands a little bit. I think, yeah, it would be great for all narrative designers to have a bit of a background in design as well, just to be a better pitcher, really.
Hmm. You you spark a question that's completely just came off the side here. You, uh, an aspiring designer or writer who wants to get into this space needs to learn, like you say, design, but also the narrative, the chops in writing. Should they be dedicating a chunk of their time to the soft skills, communications and psychology and understanding and becoming more empathetic? Is that something we should also be working on?
I think absolutely that is something that you kind of have to learn for yourself a bit. They don't have classes on empathy, I don't think. Maybe I mean, there's probably a class for everything at this point, but it's definitely easier to go to a class or attend a seminar, go to GDC, to learn more of those hard skills as opposed to the soft skills. And that is something that a lot of, especially like aspiring designers, don't realize that uh, they struggle with, and that can be really frustrating on both sides because they're like, oh, I have like a great portfolio. I know how to write incredibly well. I can work within Unity or Unreal, any game engine, but I'm still not getting a job. Why is that? And some of it is just lacking those soft skills. And so if there's a way to focus on that and build it, then you absolutely should. It's just, again, it's more challenging because it's not something that people are being taught in like school. It's hard to put a metric on what the success of that is. But it's just as, if not more important.
Interesting. That's something I did study back in my corporate days, back when I was a CMO, and there are things out there for it, but they're more aimed at the corporate world
Mm.
and boardrooms and C-suite stuff. But anyways, that's not on the topic. I was just curious. All right, let's bring the core topic kind of to a close here. Put a pin in it. I guess I'm just looking for game writers, narrative designers that are listening who want to develop their skills, or people who want to get into this space. What would you say is, just let's boil it down to just one key thing, one shift, something they need to learn? What's the key thing they need to know to develop their careers?
This was a hard one for me when I was going in, and I feel like it's difficult for a lot of people, but design is really what is the most important. we are not the most important discipline in the room, by far. And we shouldn't be trying to get games to bend to the story's will. And that could be difficult sometimes, to stomach. A lot of junior writers I'll see, like, they'll overwrite a whole bunch of text. I'll be like, cut it down, and they're like, well, but all of this is important, and I'm like, yeah, but you have to click through this text box like 7 times, and no player's going to want to do that. um you have to be able to understand from a design standpoint, like, why you're getting the notes that you're getting, and think not just as a writer but as a gamer. Know what things you like to see in video games. And when it comes to walls of text, how many times do you actually see walls of text in a video game? Um, are you really sitting through every single cutscene, or are you skipping them? Be able to kind of look into the eyes of somebody who's, an audience member, right? Actually playing those games. Um, and then when you're writing, take that into consideration.
That's good advice. There we go. Thank you for that one. All right. Well, that wraps up the core topic. Before we start heading for the door, I have a fun question I ask everybody who comes on the show, a little philosophical question that lives at the heart of this social experiment I call a podcast. That question is, in my opinion, there's a magical space at the intersection of obviously story and game, but also improv, comic books, movies, film, music, all these things where we can all just get together. There's a shared language. There's an instant fellowship. If you agree with me, and not everybody does, but if you do, what is the magical thread that holds that space together?
I would say that the thread that holds that space together is humanity, actually. I think no matter what we're doing, like, I mean, we've been making stories since we existed, right? And there's always going to be like an innate, like, primal desire to tell stories. And that's just a way that communities got together. That was the way that tribes survived. Stories are more than just enjoyment, like they are a way of life. And so no matter what medium it's in, it's going to be a story, and it's basically the core of what it means to be like a person. So especially, another piece of advice for writers too is just really hone into that, knowing that, you know, even though you can be writing like a sci-fi or a game with monsters, things that are non-human, like, at the core of it, it still has to reflect a human experience for people to actually be able to relate to it, because of course we will relate as humans because that's what we all are. And that is really why we can come together and enjoy the things that we do, because it's been like that really since the beginning of time.
I haven't heard that answer before.
Really.
I like that one. I've heard a lot of answers now. A lot. That was a really good one. I like that. Okay. Well, that is the core of it. Before we start heading for the door, I do like to open up a little space if there's anything you've worked on or are working on that you want to signal boost. And also, where can we find you online if you want us to follow your journey?
Sweet. I have a website, of course, just ashleypoprik.com. Also for people who are interested in being a game writer, whether that's like you're just hearing it for the first time or you've been trying for a while, I have a resources page on there, ashleypoprik.resources. Those are resources that I use to get into games and resources that I still use while being a working game writer. There's so much stuff in there. I mean, there's different like blogs and articles to look at. There's different YouTube channels, all the tools that I've used when being a game writer. There's Discord channels, and also all of the like job posting sites that I use when I'm looking for games jobs. So I'd fully recommend checking that out if you are currently watching this and like, how do I actually get into games? There's a lot of just like really practical stuff there. I'm also available on Blue Sky, Instagram, just my name, Ashley Poprik, no dots, no underscores or anything like that. And I am currently working at Bungie on Destiny 2. So we are announcing some pretty cool stuff. Destiny 2, The Edge of Fate. It'll be May 6th if you are interested in that. So come check it out. There's some cool stuff going on.
It's completely a coincidence that I'm wearing my Techian hoodie.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. You had to earn these. You had to, this is one of those things you had to earn in order to buy it. It was cool. I love this one.
That's awesome.
That's all of it. I guess it's time for us to say goodbye. But before I push you out into the cold, I would love to give you the last word of the episode. Is there parting words of wisdom for us?
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming and for listening to this podcast. If you are interested in being a game writer, something that I recommend to everybody, my mentees, my colleagues, especially in a time where the games industry is as crazy and scary as it is just to know that it is a very hard and long winding road. It is a very challenging thing to be a game writer and to work in games, but there is a destination on that long winding road, and so you just have to keep putting one foot in front of the other. So keep doing it. Keep at it. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for another episode of the Corner of Story and Game. A huge thanks to Ashley Poprik for joining us and sharing her insights into how narrative design is evolving and where it might be heading next. And thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this episode. If you enjoyed the conversation, please follow along on your platform of choice, hit that subscribe, comment, or like button, and hey, if you want to join the conversation, come on over on the Discord server. Until next time, keep telling stories, making games, and creating worlds worth getting lost in. Stay safe out there, Wanderer. Your chair will be ready by the fire the next time you stop in at the Corner of Story and Game.